So love them or hate them, these characters definitely leave you thinking. These are 15 heroes who fell far enough to become the villain. Wanda Maximoff started out as a threat to the Avengers, but ultimately joined them to take down Ultron. Being a hero is hard enough, especially when you keep losing people. Like, she lost her brother and then her lover. WandaVision explores her grief by having her force an entire town to act out her sitcom fantasy. But it was Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness where her true villainy became clearest.
This is me being reasonable.
We sometimes do the worst things for our loved ones, something this next person knows all too well. How far would you be willing to go to keep your family safe? Walter White was willing to leave his low-paying job as a chemistry teacher to start raking in the cash, selling some pretty life-ruining drugs, all to make sure his family would be okay after he passed away. And like, it cost him the love of his family anyway. But considering how selfish he is by the end of the series,
I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
You can only really feel bad for the well-intentioned man he used to be. Sorta like a certain former Jedi Master. Anakin Skywalker was supposed to be the chosen one. He became a Jedi and helped keep the galaxy safe during the Clone Wars. But with Palpatine in his ear, encouraging Anakin to embrace the dark side of the Force,
good as a point of view, Anakin,
it became a little inevitable that he'd complete his transformation into Sith Lord Darth Vader. Just as inevitable as it is for you to hit that subscribe button, so maybe do that now while we're moving on to discussing another figure manipulated by a big, dark, shadowy figure. If you had the ability to kill someone from a distance, would you do it? Light gains the ability by finding the Death Note, a book that spells the end for anyone who has their name written in it. And although he swears to use it only to rid the world of evil, he quickly gets swept up in the power and becomes the very sort of villain he set out to defeat.
It's not enough. This world is still rotten.
And speaking of heroes who became the type of villain he hunted, small packages don't always mean good things, like Daenerys Targaryen or Scrappy Doo, the latter of whom was introduced as Scooby's pint-sized nephew in the 70s and came to be known as one of the most hated fictional characters of all time. James Gunn decided to play on this image by making him the villain of Scooby Doo the movie, introducing him as a former member of Mystery Inc., who was kicked out for being annoying.
That little egomaniac had flipped his lid.
And so, he sought revenge by taking over Spooky Island. Daenerys was a clear fave for succession of the Iron Throne. She tried to be just, listen to advice, and best of all, she had dragons. I mean, how cool is that? But after the Battle of King's Landing, Daenerys totally snaps and gives in to the dreaded Targaryen madness that plagued many of her ancestors, taking out hundreds of innocent people while on the back of her dragon.
It was necessary.
Many of us were just as disappointed by this as people of Gotham were by our next entry. Harvey Dent was supposed to save Gotham.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
As district attorney, he was able to fight crime in a way that even Batman couldn't. But after losing his girlfriend to mobsters who simultaneously left him with scars on one half of his face, Gotham's White Knight became Two-Face, a vengeance-driven madman who uses the flip of a coin to decide how to get back at the mobsters who had done this to him. You had one job, Harvey, but then again, so did this next person. As head of the White Council, Saruman was supposed to protect Middle-earth from the Dark Lord. But over time, he grew jealous of the amount of power the Dark Lord had.
Against the power of mortal, there can be no victory.
So, when Gandalf tells him where to find the One Ring, Saruman decides to claim it for himself, or else join the Dark Lord and serve by his side. In doing so, Saruman betrays the White Council, similar to how this next person betrays the X-Men. Jean Grey has always been, like, the most powerful member of the X-Men. Her telekinetic powers gave even Professor Xavier a run for his money. And the worst part is that she isn't always able to keep them under control.
When it comes, people get hurt.
When she loses control, she becomes bonded with an ancient, destructive force known as the Phoenix Force, turning her into the villainous Dark Phoenix. At which point, she takes out Mystique and even destroys an entire planet. She may not want to be doing any of this, but that only makes her more like our next entry on the list. Michael Corleone never wanted anything to do with the family business. Even after he became the Godfather, he still tried to turn it all around into a legitimate business, and even set up a charitable foundation. But his need for revenge and his ruthless approach to getting it sort of muddies that a bit.
Things may get rough with the move we're trying.
In the end, his violent life makes him far from a heroic figure, like a certain superpowered teenager who knows something about family being a bad influence. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Look at Andrew Detmer. He started out pretty low on the social ladder, but when he stumbles across a mysterious crystal that grants him superpowers, he finds himself with a new lease on life. But this isn't the superhero origin you would think. Instead, Andrew views himself as an apex predator.
Lion does not feel guilty when it kills a gazelle.
Using his powers to get revenge against those who hurt him. And if this list proves anything, it's that revenge can be a dangerous motivator. Eric Lentra may have good reason to believe he needs to protect himself, like he was experimented on while at Auschwitz before going on to become friends with Charles Xavier, and even helping him to gather the first X-Men.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lentra. Charles Xavier.
But Eric never could get over his past, and although it broke Xavier's heart to see him go, they went their separate ways as Eric sought revenge, sorta like a certain prom queen. Poor Carrie White. Like Andrew Detmer, she was bullied a lot in school. And when she went to prom, her bullies rigged the election for prom queen just to dump pig's blood over her in front of everyone. But what they didn't see coming was Carrie's telekinetic powers, which, similar to Jean Grey, she couldn't always control. Carrie's got her revenge, whether they'd made fun of her or not, similar to how this next guy turned against his best friend. You probably know Lex Luthor as Superman's rival, but did you know that he and Clark used to be friends? Yeah, according to Smallville, they got along great, except for the fact that when Lex discovered that Clark was a superpowered alien, he wanted to use him to his benefit.
My intellect, your powers?
And speaking of villains who have a complicated relationship with their hero, sometimes all it takes is one bad day, am I right? And Arthur Fleck's had several. Like, his work as a clown became a nightmare after he was beaten on the job. His dream of being a stand-up comedian wasn't working out, and to make matters worse, the city defunded the one lifeline he had in his mental health treatment.
Got nothing left to lose?
And so Arthur became the Joker, inciting chaos and encouraging others to do the same. So which of these heroes turned villains is your favorite? And are there any other characters we forgot to mention? We're sure there's a lot. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to let us know in the comment section below.